This really is a great effort from Dapol. The locomotive looks the part. Well, a big hello to you. It's great to see you. I hope you're well. And welcome back up here to the loft on Weir Yard with me, Jenny Kirk. Today we're going to be taking a look at a model which was announced some time ago and it's taken quite a while to come through to the market, but it's finally been delivered. And it's really interesting to see whether it has lived up to all of that anticipation that is built up. Of course, it's been delayed through no fault of the manufacturer, and actually I was reading in the news today that all manufacturers are really quite suffering with that extended and rather distended shipping from China. But it has finally arrived, and I'm really grateful to Dapol for lending me one of their large 262 Prairie tanks. So without further ado, let's take a look and see if it really does live up to that anticipation that has built up whilst we've been waiting for it to arrive. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. And don't forget that we'll be doing a full DCC fitting guide towards the end of this video. Additional support also comes from PD Models, makers of an amazing range of 3D printed detailing parts and accessories and kits designed to bring that something extra special to your model railway. So check them out at the link down below. So come with me and let's take a really good close look at the all new Dapol large Prairie tank. For a very long time, Dapol were probably best known for their N-gauge models, but more recently we've seen a whole wealth of models coming through in other scales too. We've had the O-gauge models, some of which we've reviewed here on the channel, but also the 00 too, and some of those have actually been really impressive models, and Dapol have truly strived to bring innovation to the market. We've had the Terrier from them, we've had the D-Class and the GWR Mogul too. And this 5101 class large Prairie is the latest of those models to come through. And Dapol have very kindly loaned me this particular model. Now they are available in a number of different liveries, but I'm just going to show you there on the end of the box. Large Prairie 4134 lined green early crest, bunker steps, and this is suitable for era 4, and I do like the fact that they're putting the eras that they're suitable for on the side. Catalogue number 4S-041-006. Now they are also doing these in the late crest BR green. We've also got BR black and a number of different GWR liveries, and we've got a fully lined out BR black with the British Railways across the bunker sides, which is certainly a livery which you don't tend to see a huge amount about, but I do have a few in my collection, so it does look to be an interesting one for those modelling the transition, the early period of BR. Now the box is nice and substantial, something that Dapol do really well across their different gauges, and we get quite a substantial booklet. We saw this as well with the D-Class, with the Mogul as well, and it does include a lot of information for if you get the factory fitted sound options. So it's got all the information for all the different versions. Now, in terms of decoder fitting, this takes a Next 18. This has become quite common in the Dapol range. They do appear to have standardized for the 00 models. An awful lot of them now are coming through with Next 18, which is pretty simple to install, and we're going to be doing a full installation of a Next 18 decoder to this model, showing you exactly how to get into it, how to fit that in, and we'll be using a Trainomatic Next 18 decoder, and we've got a link to those in the description box down below. Just getting the rest of the packaging off the model. It is well packaged for transport, so we shouldn't see any problems with transit. And we do get an extra detailing bag here, and I'm going to go through the contents of that in just one moment. In the booklet, there's some really handy information, and I do like the way that Dapol have been going above and beyond with these. So we've got some information on the different lots of the original prototype locomotives, the numbers that they carried when they were built, and this is actually really useful because if you're modelling very earlier period grouping GWR, so between 1929 and 1930, there's no point in having one of the models that's got the higher numbers because they just didn't exist. We've also got a little brief history of the prototypes. Really, really interesting. Designed by G.J. Churchwoodford, dependent upon class suburban, passenger, commuter and banking uses. So pretty much these were the class 25s of their day, the jack of all trades. We've also got a firebox flicker effect in there, and this is something that Dapol very much pioneered from the ready-to-run big manufacturers, and certainly it's something we saw from the Terrier onwards, really being quite impressed with how that has become an interesting and very effective standard, and certainly one which makes better use of DCC functions than we'd been seeing before. We've also got some really good graphics here taken from the CADs for how to get into the model. We've also got information on how to open up the coal hopper as well, and it comes fully modelled with a detailed interior, so we will take a look at that. In terms of fitting a speaker to this, if you want to go down your own installation of a sound option, they do come with the speaker surround. These take quite a small iPhone type speaker, and so in the detail bag we get this extra little piece, and I will show you where that goes. We also get the tool for opening the smokebox door without damaging any of the detail or finish, and that is common as well. We've already seen that for the Mogul and for the D-Class too. And then we've also got front coupling. In fact, no, this is interesting. On this particular one, we do appear to have a spare coupling, but the model itself is fitted with front and back couplings. And then we've also got some etched nameplates. Those are the number for this locomotive. So we've got 4134. So on the side of the bunker we can see that they are just printed on, but they do supply you with these raised etched metal number plates if you wish to glue them over the top. And if you are going to do that, what I would recommend is don't use anything like super glue, because you will just make a mess. Super glue does have a habit of getting like a white bloom around it. So I would actually suggest a tiny dab of PVA will be more than enough to get these on without causing any real damage to the underlying paintwork. So if you need to reposition them as well, you've got plenty of time for doing that. The rest of the model does look the part. There's a definite high level of weight here, and this is something that Dapol have been really good at doing, getting a lot of adhesive weight into these models. Considering its size, it does feel really nice and weighty. Another area which is actually quite impressive is the safety valve bonnet on there, and it does look like metal. I don't think it is, but certainly it's something that we saw on the D-Class, that they're getting really good with this shiny brass effect, and it doesn't look like painted plastic like we used to get. You can also see that it's different to the copper chimney cap, and the colouring on these is absolutely perfect. So copper chimney cap, brass safety valve bonnet. Certainly characteristic of GWR prototypes. They definitely have a very much a characteristic house style. The look of this locomotive is being captured really well. Now, I know that there's an area where people always seem to like to pick a fault with Dapol models with the running plate and the way the body sits on top. So I'm going to pay very close attention on this model, and what I can see there is that the body is sitting just right there on the actual running plate. So anybody who tries to tell me, like they tried to tell me quite wrongly in the Terrier video, that, oh, why didn't you mention the bowed running plate? Well, because it didn't have a bowed running plate, and this model certainly does not. So just to make it clear there, it is all fitting together really, really nicely. Let's just take a look at the other side, and again, that body is fitting nice and flush to the running plate. And just to avoid any kind of quibble, so here is a straight edge. I'm going to press that right up to there. That is absolutely spot on. Just that's as close as I can get this ruler to that end. I think it's actually quite difficult to hold this in nice and close, but you get the idea that we've got a perfectly straight running plate. I'm going to just apply the metal rule to this side, and again just holding that in there, and we are absolutely straight and bob on that side as well. So pretty pleased with that. They've really captured the bulk of these models, and one of the other things I do quite like as well is when you look underneath, you've got the characteristic red of the inside motion is visible through there, even though you can't really see anything from the top because of the length of these tanks. The wheels themselves do look pretty good. We've got fairly flat connecting rods. They're all metal. And we've got correctly fluted rods on here, and the crosshead slide does look particularly good. Now they are angled out at the end, just as per the prototype, and then where we've got the bracket there, it's all held together nice and tight, and it doesn't feel to be loose in any way. So there's no slop or jiggle in that, and it's all metal. The whole crosshead and the piston slide there too, everything is metal, so this does look pretty durable. Dapol have also captured the profile of these front cylinders, again very characteristic of the GWR, this kind of angled slope and then curve around, and that has been captured really nicely. I'm guessing that the GWR had a much more generous loading gauge because of the legacy of the broad gauge beginnings, so that did mean that when they'd gone to standard gauge there was a lot more space to make use of, to kind of make sure that they got the best out of the locomotives. So I'm just going to take a look at the inside of the bunker. So this does look fairly easy. Just a tiny jeweler screwdriver, and you can kind of flick it up. It's almost like opens like a bonnet there. And that then lets you just carefully take hold, and we can slip this out. It's just a plastic insert. The actual cut of that coal is pretty reasonable, but you can always add some extra to that if you want. Or, because we've got a fully detailed bunker interior there, you can add any amount of coal that you so wish into there. And it's actually quite interesting to see this structure and how it kind of goes under the back of the cab, which of course is something which, if you ever look in real locomotives, they do. But because we're so used to a fixed top to bunkers, it's detail that you don't normally see. Let's see if I can angle the light down there just a little bit more, and you can see that is fully detailed. They weren't kidding when they said in the instructions that we've got a fully detailed bunker interior. And certainly there's plenty of space in there that if you want to cover it up, you can easily fit something like Stay Alive or an additional speaker in there quite readily, I would guess. Just looking to the cab roof doesn't come off, but just looking deep there into the cab interior, I can see all of the back head detail. Yeah, you can just about see it there. Really is exquisite. We've got that brake standard as well, and we've got the reversing lever, very characteristically tall there. It's actually quite hard to see with the camera. The back there, we've got toolboxes. There's a lot of detail going on in there. I'm just testing the doors. Now they don't open, but certainly there is a very impressive level of detail inside that cab. Looking across the top of the boiler, we've got whistles there. I think these are a plastic moulding, but they do seem reasonably robust, and I do particularly like the way those pipes sort of bend down, round and over, and then back into the cab front. There is an ever so slight gap there between those whistles and the front of the cab, but it's not overly apparent unless you really go looking deep for it. The cab glazing is entirely flush, and actually there's no prismatic effect around the edges on these, and that actually looks on the screen of the camera almost like there's no glass there. Now I can tell you looking at it that there is definitely, and I'll just tap it there, and there is definitely a glazing in there, but it is really, really well done. It's probably some of the best glazing I've seen. There's none of that kind of almost like a fishbowl effect or a Coke bottle bottom effect going on. It really does work well. Again, on the back of the cab, we've got the same, that flush glazing, but with these protective bars over the top, which on the real locomotive were just to stop chunks of coal from bouncing up and smashing the glass. The back of that bunker too, look at that rivet detail, and this very complex shape in the top where you can see there, that is really nicely done. That very complex shape has been captured perfectly, and we've also got separately applied handrails on there. You can see through them. They're made of a thin wire, but really, really nice. We've got lamp irons across the bottom. These, let's just check and see. I think they're moulded on, but it's not apparent that they're moulded on. Now, they look like they're possibly part of the moulding, but it's really well done. And again, it goes to show that clever design doesn't need separately applied bits and pieces. It doesn't need to add expense. When something is that well designed that it looks like it could be a separate metal bracket but isn't, then I think that is very much job done. The vacuum standards are there, fitted as standard from the factory. Again, more rivet detail on the buffer beam. All those rivets are in just the right places. We've got fully sprung buffers, and these have got a pleasing amount of spring to them. They don't feel either too light as to be useless or too stiff that they don't do anything at all, and they don't stick inside the shanks either. So that is actually quite a pleasing spring effect when you're actually pushing on them. Looking further down the top of the boiler band's really nice in there, and this lining too is really, really sharp. In fact, when we get really nice and close, it's straight, it's true, it's exactly where it should be. And I really like that kind of yellow band and the black band are absolutely parallel. That is really nice. These lifting eyes too on the top of the tanks. Again, it's detailed so good as to look like they're separately applied, but actually they are. These lifting eyes are separately applied. I'm not going to force it up, but that is actually really, really well done. I do like that. And then we've got the row of the rivets right where they need to be. Some rivets here around the flange with the pipe work up to the safety valve bonnet. And then we've got the water level. These are for letting the air back out of the tanks. So when they're being filled up, you don't end up with pressurized air suddenly farting the water back out into all over the place. They just kind of let the tank breathe as it fills up. And they are, again, pretty sturdy. They feel like they're metal, which is really good because sometimes little bits like that do get knocked, and that just really does feel robust. The rest of the front of the locomotive, the front of that boiler, again, complex shapes, really well realised. I do like that smokebox saddle underneath there. Again, it's a really, really complicated shape. Looks really, really good. We've got, it's actually really difficult to show up on the camera, but you can just see in there that smokebox saddle, The steam blast pipes from the cylinder, really, really nicely realised. And then again, more of the mechanics of the locomotive. And they look so good as to be that they could move on their own, just as they would do on the prototype. We've also got these front stays just here, which again, very characteristic of a lot of the GWR locomotives, and they are separate parts. I can get that tool all the way underneath there, and all of this extra detail too on the front of the running plate. Really, really nicely done. On the front of the smokebox, you can see a really nicely printed smokebox number. Again, the numerals are really, really sharp and in exactly the right font. That smokebox dart is really nice. It's separately applied, made of wire, and you can just see there with the arms of that dart in exactly the right position. And this locomotive comes with an 87E shed code on the front there. It's printed on, but the quality is so good, it does almost look like it's a separately applied piece. Handrails are all metal, all really robust. There's no sign of any looseness or anything running the risk of coming off. Again, front buffers, they're sprung just like the rear ones, same level of spring. It's actually really, it's kind of a firm but pleasing amount of spring on those. On the rear of the bunker here, we've got the steps up the side. Again, they look really good. I think they are moulded as part of the body, but they are slender enough that you're actually left wondering, are they metal painted to match? Certainly really, really good. Lining on the side of the tanks, again, straight, true. Even follows perfectly that line of rivets there where the angle changes. And that British Railways cycling lion totem is really, really sharp. You can see there it's got all the detail that it needs. The rivets on the tank are literally rivet perfect, and just moving that along, we've got additional printed detail. Again, the lining is not phased by any of this complex shape, by any of the rivets. There's no smudging, it's straight and true. We've got the additional markings, and actually I did have to check that that wasn't actually a separately applied piece, because it does look good enough to be that way. And even though they do supply you with separate plates to go on here, in my opinion, I wouldn't see it absolutely necessary to apply them. And if this were my model, I'd just be quite happy to leave it the way it is out of the box. Looking at the rear of the locomotive, I do as well like these steps. You can see those gaps through, and they are pretty strong and robust. They feel like they may even be made from metal, and certainly it's an area where nobody likes the steps on their model being brittle, easily broken. It's too easy to catch things like this, and this does feel incredibly robust. We've got the sandboxes there. I have managed to catch the sandpipe there, but it's not a problem because these are quite easy to bend back to the right shape. They're made of a flexible plastic. The brake gear on the bottom of the locomotive is all factory applied. And then we've got a very interesting, very flexible rear pony truck. So we've got a lot of lateral movement for the wheels. Then we've also got that side-to-side movement for the full pony truck assembly, with the couplings themselves held in a NEM pocket attached to that pony truck. Turning it round for the front of the locomotive, again, really the structure of these front ponies are really nicely done. We saw this on the Mogul as well, and this is no different. This is really, really well done. There's not as much side-to-side movement on the front pony wheels, but there is a little bit. And again, the front coupling is in a NEM pocket. This is actually, rather than having that kind of triangular tail that you see on the back there, where you can lever the full thing out, on the front, whilst the front coupling can be pulled out, that box shape there does look like it will remain on the front pony, but not too obtrusively. We've got a really nice spring effect on this front bogie, and it'll be interesting to see just how well that helps it to follow the track. On the DCC Concepts rolling road running out of the box on DC, the locomotive was pretty smooth and controllable, even down to some pretty slow speeds. Now, it does recommend some running in. I didn't actually do that. I always think it's a great test of the locomotive manufacturing if it will actually run straight out of the box, and this locomotive really did perform well. No sign of any tight spots, and certainly the performance was more than adequate. When it comes to DCC fitting, we recommend the use of the Train-O-Matic Next 18 decoder as seen here. We've got a link to these in the description box down below if you want to find your own, and it is a really tight small factor decoder which is a perfect fit to this locomotive. To get into the locomotive, it's simply a case of removing the smoke box door. Using the supplied tool, it's a little bit fiddly, and sometimes you do have to feel yourself being a little bit careful because you're not quite sure straight off the bat how much pressure it will take. But actually, believe me, it's quite easy there, and you can see the smoke box door just pops out. It's a push fit. Inside, that reveals this daughter board that fits almost in like a racking system just inside the smoke box barrel. Very, very carefully take a pair of needle nose pliers, and don't get too carried away. You don't need to go in too deep. You just need to carefully grip the edge of that daughter board, and then very, very carefully pull, and you'll feel it click, and it just slides out. And you can see there that it's got this very, very easy interface reminiscent of old 8-bit ISA computer expansion cards. And on this daughter board as well, you can see on the underside the pads for the speaker wires. Now, you don't need to actually solder to these. The speaker just literally just sits there pressing onto those, and then with the enclosed speaker enclosure, then all this does is this clips in and just holds everything down and together. So sound installation is really quite easy. On the other side, you'll see here we've got the blanking plate. It's really easy to remove these, no special tools required. Just very gently tip it up and it just pops out. What we can then do is just get out our Next 18 decoder from the Train-O-Matic range, and again orientated the same way that you saw the blanking plate when it came out. It's just really, really easy. Line up the socket and very, very gently push down, and you'll feel it click into place. You don't have to force it. You don't need excessive push on this. If you're really trying to force it and it doesn't feel like it's going, just check that orientation is right. We're then all in place, and you can see there it's firmly attached to the daughter board. So we line that up with those runners that you see just inside the barrel, and that just drops down and pushes in. You should only need to push it with your finger. If it's not matching up, then the chances are you've not got it in those runners on either side. And it's just push it back in and then reattach the smoke box door. Just be a bit careful because that smoke box dart is a separately applied piece. Really nicely done, but you don't want to put pressure direct onto that. I'm not saying that it's weak, it's just that with some of this detail it's probably best not to try and put it to the test. And you just very carefully push that smoke box door back in, interference fit, and there you have it. It couldn't be simpler to DCC fit this model. On DCC, the performance of the model was exceptionally good. Had slow speed control right up to a prototypical fast pace, and it didn't seem notchy at all. There was no jerks in the speed curve, And the other thing as well I noticed was that there was no need to change any of the back EMF settings. It just worked with that decoder out of the box to give smooth, responsive running both up and down gradients. It also has to be said that this locomotive handled the somewhat unprototypical 5% grades on Weir Yard with remarkable ease. It managed a train of 3 mineral wagons plus brake van without starting to slip on even the tightest curves on the steepest gradient. On level track, it was more than happy to handle some quite long trains, and I didn't have any problems with derailments at all during the period, and it went through even some of the most complicated point work with no issues whatsoever. The more it ran, the smoother it got, and it just goes to show that actually a lot of locomotives are much improved for a little bit of running in. But that doesn't take anything away from the fact that out of the box this did just work. I found the DCC fitting to be pretty straightforward, and there's plenty of space in there even though it's using the Next 18 decoder, which is normally reserved for slightly more space-starved models. It did feel that it wasn't pushed for space, and if it's anything like the D-Class, there'll be more than enough room for a stay alive inside there, plus that speaker too, if you want to go the whole hog and have a fully sound fitted, stay alive fitted model. The choice is entirely up to you. In terms of price, this model is available, I've seen around, for just under £120 from a number of different sources. We've got an affiliate link in the description box down below that takes you to Rails of Sheffield, and the model is available in a plethora of prototypically accurate liveries and numbers, which means that you can model anywhere from the time that these were first introduced on the Great Western Railway right through to early British Railways and early and late Crest. A number of these locomotives did make it through to preservation, so they're even suitable for anybody who wants an excuse to run a steam locomotive on their more modern image layout, perhaps as a rail tour locomotive or something along those lines. Although, always remember, model railways, they're supposed to be fun. Just remember, it's your railway, your rules. So let's look to the scores. First up is build quality, and actually this locomotive has proved to be very robust with handling. I've not had any parts come loose or come off, and I'm particularly pleased with things like these cab steps that do feel very robust. Front steps too are all part of that running plate moulding, and everything just seems to be where it should be, and nice and firmly too. None of the handrails are broken or come loose, which is always a really good sign. The only thing that I could possibly fault with the model is that these rear sandpipes are a little bit too flexible and have a habit to bend further and further away from the wheels, but there's no risk of them getting caught up in the spokes, and actually the flexible plastic does allow them to be bent back into shape, so no real problems there, so I'm going to give it a 9.9. On running quality, the locomotive did handle Weir Yard really well, including the gradiented innermost line, which is always a challenge for pretty much any locomotive. It handled a train of 3 coal wagons plus a brake van up the 5% curved grade, and this is always one to put locomotives to the extreme test. It did also manage to get round radius 1 curves, although as it's built on the box as only being suitable down to radius 2, that was actually pretty impressive, but I wouldn't recommend running it routinely on such tight curves, as the pony trucks do tend to push right up behind the steps. One area where it did seem to struggle just a little bit was going over troughs in the track, that is, a change in gradient where the locomotive has run down a gradient and then transfers to the level, and it did feel a little bit like the locomotive did have a tendency to start to beach itself on the front and rear pony trucks. It did manage to keep going though, and there didn't seem to be any real chance of stalling. The locomotive does have a really good tractive weight, and that meant that on the more straight and level tracks on Weir Yard, it was able to handle some really quite prototypically long trains, probably far longer than the real locomotives would have ever been tasked with, and it did feel like it was quite capable to run with those all day long. So all in all, I'm going to give this an 8.7. When it comes to DCC fitting and innovation, this is an area that Dapol really have got you covered. That removable smokebox door and that slide-out daughterboard means that it is so easy to make full use of to get in there and do the DCC fitting. Whilst you're in there as well, if you want to fit a speaker, it really couldn't be easier, and no soldering whatsoever is required. There's also enough room in there too that if you get a small stay alive, you can just about manage to fit that in with the decoder, just as we showed with the D class some time ago, and it does really put peace of mind to you that you know that you can fit these things without having to do any major surgery on the locomotive. The model is also available with a sound fitted option, and that does take a little bit of the pain out of the way of anybody who just wants to open the box and get it running with all those sounds without having to go through any of the setup. I found that the back EMF didn't need tweaking at all with the decoder used. I did eventually work out the firebox glow, which is becoming something of a Dapol trademark, although I did feel that it was somewhat dim. I could see it with my naked eye, but I really struggled to pick it up with the camera, so it's just very difficult to show you this. I'm sure that it's possible to make it a little bit brighter by fiddling with CV settings, but I would have preferred that to be just a little bit brighter out of the box. But that's the only area that I could count against this model, and really that daughterboard inside the smoke box with that really super easy DCC fit does go a long way to smooth that out. So I'm going to give this a 9.8. On accuracy and quality of finish, this really is a great effort from Dapol. The locomotive looks the part, and the clever use of materials such as metal and plastic in its construction, plus the really effective shiny dome in brass and the chimney cap in copper, really does make this feel like the materials are just right through and through in the construction of this model, and I'm going to give this a 9.8. When it comes to value for money, again, this locomotive does give you a lot for your money. I've been able to find these locomotives out there on the market for just a shade under £120 at the time of filming, and in this day and age that really does offer super value for money for a 262 Prairie tank that is loaded up with an awful lot of features and an awful lot of detail. So I'm going to give this a 9.8, and that gives us a combined total of 48.0 out of 50, a very credible score for an incredible locomotive. And don't forget that if you really like the look of today's locomotive, we've got an affiliate link down below in the description box to help you find your own version of this model in all of the different liveries that it's available in. Did you agree with my findings on this locomotive? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Is this a model that you've been eagerly awaiting too? Is this a locomotive that you've already got in your collection, or is this one that you're going to be adding to your wanted list? Let me know down below, and I do enjoy hearing from all of you. Also, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also check out our merch at the merch shop down below too, where you can find a whole range of t-shirts, hoodies, die-cut stickers and mugs too. All the great things for the JK aficionado. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. Today's video also comes with the support of PD Models, makers of a whole range of 3D printed kits and accessory detailing that brings something special to your model layout. Available in a number of different scales and gauges, this range is sure to have something for you, so check them out at the affiliate link down below to see what they have got today to make your model layout something special. PD Models are also well known for their museum quality models that can be made bespoke to order, so do contact them if you have some specific requirements and see if they can do something special for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, and Alan Dickerson. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.